guys, Mia here. Today's video is going to be my wrap-up for the month of July. I ended up reading a lot in the month of July, which was unexpected. I read a total of 13 things during the month of July, which was a very nice surprise because I did not expect to read as much. Let's go ahead and get into the books and stuff that I read so this video doesn't become too long. I read 4 books during the month of July. Now, one of these books was a horror story. Another one was a non-fiction comedy kind of book. And then the last 2 were both mystery, suspense kind of books. I also read 2 poetry collections, 6 comic volumes, and 1 children's book. Out of all these books, I had some fantastic reads and some not so great. So I'll start again with the least favorite, move my way up to my most favorite reads of the month. So I had 2 2-star reads, 1 3-star read, 6 4-star reads, and 4 5-star reads. Let's start with the first book I read this month, which was this here, Blood of Eagles. This is by Dean Ing, and I've never heard of this. I saw it on the library, and I actually took it out for my husband to read because for what I read about the book, it led me to believe that the book was about World War II and the Albanians' participation during the war, what they did, and all of that stuff. So it sounded very interesting. It sounded like the kind of thing that he would enjoy. He read a little bit of it, but he's not much of a reader, so he did end up giving up on the story, and I picked it up hoping to read it and truly enjoy it. The story, however, had nothing to do, well, it had a little bit to do with World War II, but it really was not about that culture or what their influence was during the war at all. The story was more concentrated on a particular family, and it really didn't have too much about the war. The father during the war had helped this wild Albanian men hide some gold that they took from the Nazis, and then years later they started following him and his teenager son in order to get that gold back. And honestly, it was okay. I was just not a huge fan of the writing style. I didn't really enjoy the way that it carried throughout the story and how it expressed the events that were taking place. It was packed of action, and it was a relatively fast read. It was much better at the beginning than it was towards the ending. It started really good, and I was really enjoying the storyline, even though it was not what I was expecting at first. However, as the story progressed, it just got very slow, very repetitive, and it was just not interesting. It seems like the writing itself deteriorated in its quality as the story progressed. So I ended up giving this book 2 out of 5 stars because it was just not my favorite read. The second library book that I read was Not That Kind of Girl by Lena Dunham, and I had no idea who she was, honestly, prior to reading this book. It was recommended by one of my friends who watches the show Girls and likes her as a character a lot. So this story is about her life, and quite frankly, I just did not like her as she depicted herself throughout the story. It was just not the kind of person that I personally would like to hang out with, and I couldn't really understand the reasoning behind the decisions that she made, and I just couldn't sympathize with her based on the way she depicted herself. I don't know if this is completely true to what her life history is, or if it was just more made up or not, but I just simply didn't enjoy it as much as I hope I would enjoy it. My friend told me that I should probably watch the show and maybe I would get her humor better. I might end up doing that, but as the book, I just didn't love it as much. So I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. Then I read Tomb Raider. This was another read that was a little bit of a disappointment. It wasn't horrible. I liked the artwork. I liked the storyline as a whole. However, it did left me kind of confused. I didn't really understand the plot too much. It was enjoyable to read, but it was just not too interesting. I don't remember much about it, to be honest, and I just read it this month. So it was one of those reads that you read it, but doesn't really leave you with anything other than, you know, the time you spent reading it. So I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Getting into the 4-star reads, I read The Horror of Amityville, or the Amityville Horror, I'm sorry. This is a true story by Anson. This book was recommended to me by one of my viewers, and it took me a while to read it because I like horror, but it takes me a minute to actually read it. I have to be in the mood, and I ended up reading this at night. I personally found it very, very scary. I know there's a lot of horror cliches on this book, and I don't care because I really did enjoy it. Overall, the writing was pretty good. I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. I'm sure most of you know what this story is about, so I'll leave it at that. There is a movie as well, so I'll probably watch the movie next just to compare it to the book. Last month, I also read The Weight of Blood. This is by McHugh, or McHugh. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. I'm horrible at pronouncing names. Anyways, this was a pretty interesting story. It's basically about a young girl who is investigating the death of a close friend as well as the disappearance of her mother. The story has different perspectives, so it's got the perspective of the main character, her mother, and other people throughout, you know, the story, which I personally like that because it gives me insight on what other people witness, and it gives me insight on how they feel about things. So I enjoyed that kind of writing, and I enjoyed the story as a whole. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. It was not as mysterious as I would have liked. At the beginning it was, but the big revealing at the end was not as good as I thought it could have been, which is why I didn't give it 5 stars. However, I did enjoy the read a lot. The storyline was pretty interesting. It was a fast read, and I really liked it. I also read Harbinger Volume 2. This is the Renegades, and Harbinger Wars. So this is not actual Volume 3 Harbinger Wars. This is something that you're supposed to read before. It's like the beginning of the Harbinger Wars. I'm not 100% sure yet the order of these books. I'm just basing that on the information that is got in the back. But I really enjoyed it. I read Harbinger Volume 1 a while ago, and I really enjoyed that as well. I really enjoyed this one also. This one I enjoyed it a bit more than the first one just because this one had so much action. I mean, the plot and the storyline is not necessarily the most unique, but it's pretty interesting. Basically, there is a group of psychs that this company wants to take under their wing, basically, and train them and make them more and more powerful. And there is this one specific guy, and this all takes place on the first volume, who ends up taking into this community. However, he ends up getting betrayed or manipulated in a way, so he ends up separating himself from the community. I won't tell you what happens in this volume because I feel that will definitely spoil the rest of the first volume. So anyways, it was very interesting. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Same on this one. These are events that take place after. Very, very interesting, full of action. They were almost equally interesting. I think I kind of liked the second one a little bit better than this one, but they were both very, very good, and I do highly recommend them. I also read this comic here, which I had not heard anything about, but this one is Ive Time Walker, and it turned out to be pretty interesting. Basically, he's somebody that's got the ability to walk through time. Apparently, there are several different people that can do this, and he's one of them. The storyline was pretty interesting. It was very introductory though, because it's the first volume. So I got to learn a little bit about who this character is and whatnot, but it still left me with a lot of questions by the end. So I'm not 100% sure. I gave this one basically 4 stars, but let's say more 3.5 than 4. Mostly because it left a lot of unanswered questions, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly what happened and exactly what it was about, and exactly what role each character plays. So it's a little bit confusing. I do think I'm gonna pick up the next volume because I just want to find out. So I guess that's why I gave it 4 stars, because although it was confusing and it was not a completed story, it still left me wanting to know more. I just realized that I didn't mention the writers or the artists for the last comics. I'm so sorry about that. I will list them down below, so you can take a look down there if you're interested in looking up that specific comic or any of their comics. Now, I also picked up Sweet Tooth Volume 3, and this one is Animals Armies. Animal Armies. This was pretty enjoyable as well. I have to say the second volume so far is my absolute favorite. That volume was absolutely amazing. This one was very enjoyable as well, but I did read it during my vacation, so I wasn't 100% invested into it. There was a lot of noise around me and a lot of things going on that kept distracting me, but I did enjoy it as a whole. I'll probably reread it at one point just so that I make sure that I paid attention to the whole thing and didn't miss out on anything, but volume 2 was definitely my favorite so far in this series. I won't tell you much about this. Actually, I won't tell you anything at all about this particular volume because you'll definitely spoil the last two. I do recommend it. I think it's a very good writing and very good art, and you should definitely give it a try. The next reads were my favorites of the month. This was a very interesting little poetry collection. I love them. They're so cute, seriously. They're absolutely beautiful. This one is the Midway Iterations, and this is by T.A. Noonan. It was very nice poetry. It was very much about Florida and traveling. I don't know, I just really liked it. I will probably end up doing soon another poetry recommendations video, so if I do that, this one will definitely be included in there, and I'll be able to tell you a couple of the poems in there so that you get a better idea of how the poetry was. But it's basically about a trip in Florida, but it was really nicely written and the flow was just very enjoyable. The second poetry collection that I read last month was Houses. This is a poetry collection by Nikki Wallschlaeger, and maybe mispronouncing her name, I'm so sorry. However, this poetry was very different to the other poetries that I've read so far. It was really interesting. Let's say it's about a town or a city, and each house has a different story to tell. So it was very interesting. It had some very important topics in this poetry collection. I really enjoyed it, so as with the previous one, I gave it 5 stars. I finally got my hands on Saga Volume 6. Of course I loved it. I mean, I'm quite obsessed with this series. I honestly feel that it's my absolute favorite comic series so far. I'm still getting into the whole comic world, so I'm sure there's many other series that are just as fantastic, but I'm strongly loving this series. This volume was just as amazing as the previous volumes. I mean, I've been giving 5 stars to every single one of these volumes. I just really enjoyed them. So this was another successful read. I loved it, gave it 5 out of 5 stars. And the last thing that I read this month was a children's book, and it was this one here. This is Prince Siddbartha, The Story of Buddha. This is by Jonathan Landau and Janet Brooke. I really loved it. This was absolutely beautiful. The coloring inside the artwork was to die for. It was just gorgeous. I mean, seriously, look at that. That is just the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I absolutely love this book. Definitely one of my favorite children's books, and I highly recommend it, whether you have a kid or not, because I don't have any children, but I loved reading this. Alright, you guys, these were all the reads that I had during the month of July. I feel very proud of my accomplishments, and I hope that the future months to come are just as good as this last one. I had a great time reading all of this books and comics and poetry. It was so much fun. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you very soon in another video.